Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Okay, well, I'm just going to take a few minutes at the front end of this thing. The Crossing the Chasm, as Roger mentioned, was a book that came out in 1990. I just refreshed it with examples from the 21st century. And so the question was, okay, well, what's new and what's not? Where's this model going? And so I think a big data conference is a great place to sort of test drive that issue, and that's what I want to do for you this morning. Just to kind of recalibrate, this model was the idea, if you introduce disruptive innovation into any community, how does the community react? And the community reacts in 5 different strategies. There's a technology enthusiast strategy, an innovator strategy, tends to focus on the cool tools, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The visionary or early adopter strategy, which is I'm going to go first, I'm going to get ahead of this thing. I realize most people aren't ready to do it, but I am, or I think I see the possibilities here. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to get a high reward, high risk play. The pragmatist strategy of the early majority, which is, well, I'm not. I'm going to test this thing out. I want to wait and see. And I'm going to basically calibrate my decisions with my peers. So I'm going to spend a lot of time. I might come to a conference like this as a pragmatist, but I'm primarily going to check out with other pragmatists. So are you doing this yet? Are you? Yeah? No? No? Okay, me neither. Okay. You know, or yeah, you are? Oh, well, maybe I should too. That kind of stuff. The conservatives or the late majority are doing more of like, man, if the longer I can hold this off, the better. This is just, pioneers have arrows in their back, I mean, all that kind of stuff. And then the laggards at the back end who think that everyone in this room is an instrument of the devil. And so this model, the way this model plays out, what we learned was that the first 2 groups kind of work with each other. The technology enthusiasts and the visionaries that communicate with each other. Think like Woz and Steve Jobs. I mean, Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs, classic pair. And they go early. And they go early and create this thing we ended up calling the early market. Okay? Project-oriented time. You're breaking through. You're doing all kinds of really cool things. The chasm was an effect of the pragmatists going, well, I'm not quite ready. I'm interested, but I'm not quite ready. And getting those pragmatists into the game turned out to be a much harder problem than we thought. And one of the things we learned is that to get them into the game, you have to actually focus on some early use cases where pragmatists are under duress. Pragmatists will not move until they're under duress. Pragmatists in pain are the people that move first. And that can get the sort of the innovation fire lit on the other side of the chasm. If you get a few of these use cases going, we call them bowling pins because they kind of help knock each other over, you may get to a place where you get to what we call a tornado, which is, oh my God, everybody's doing this. And then the pragmatist herd stampedes. So it's a little bit like a junior high dance moment. The chasm sort of like boys on one side of the gym, girls on the other side of the gym kind of problem, and then the tornadoes when they all come in. And it is. It's kind of like playing Othello. If you've ever played Othello and you turn one white spot to black and the entire board goes black, that kind of an issue. That's what a tornado's like. And then eventually you get to Main Street. And Main Street is, okay, we've adopted these things. We're ready to go. Now let's kind of incorporate them into things. And now let's get sustaining innovation incrementally, evolution, not revolution. So it's revolution up through the tornado, and then it's evolution after Main Street. And this is the technology adoption life cycle. The category can last for decades after this, but this is typically in the first 10 years of the category kind of model. So that's the model. It was introduced in the early 90s. It had a lot of play in the early 90s. The 2 key principles were on crossing the chasm, pick a very specific focus. That first use case, pick 1. Not 2, not 3, 1. Niche market, under intractable problem, not solvable by conventional means. Now think about this, because every one of you has a big data, who has a stake in big data. This is the target on the other side of the chasm. I'm going to argue that I don't think big data itself is across the chasm yet, so this is where I'd love to be thinking about. Process owner is under pressure to find a solution. Pragmatists are willing to consider a disruptive approach, but these beachhead segments tend to be in a single vertical industry, and even in a single department within that single vertical industry that's just the crucible of change. It's the excruciating place where the discontinuity of the digital world is meeting the reality of that sector at that moment, and there's some process owner somewhere who says, I am well and truly screwed. Right? And so how could you guys come and help? And what you need to bring to that person is the complete solution to their problem. They don't have the resources to do a big project and kind of explore with you. They're not in exploration mode. They're in desperation mode. And so bringing the whole product, and your company, no matter how big it is, will not have all of the parts of the solution. So you have to typically involve partners and allies, and you have to work to bring them together. And the lead vendor, the person who leads this charge, is the person who ends up getting the credit for this, and you end up establishing your company and the category on the other side of the chasm. So that's the game. So what happened in the first decade of this century was people said, well, I don't know, Jeff, Google, Facebook, Chasm, Instagram? I mean, like 9 months and $1 billion? Where was the chasm, dude? And so it was like, what's going on? And what we realized was in a world of digital services, when you could actually deliver straight to the consumer, go over the top of a distribution channel, you didn't need a supply chain, you didn't need all these partners and allies, you could play a very, very different game. And Eric Ries and Steve Blank caught this idea. Eric put it in a book called The Lean Startup, and it was all about the minimum viable product. Just get something out there quickly. It's going to be not quite right. Play it, adjust, play, adjust, play, adjust. You watched Facebook do this. We've watched it for the last 10 years do this. Twitter, Google, everybody playing this game. What you do is you don't worry about crossing the chasms and segments and whole products. What you worry about is how fast can I acquire traffic or eyeballs to a digital property? Can I engage them? Will they dwell with me? Will they come back? Will they spend time with me? Can I convert them to some kind of economic model, even if it's just being willing to look at ads or click through or participate? And can I enlist? Can I create a viral thing where some of them will not only like but share, right? And I can start acquiring new people. And these four, we call them the 4 gears. And the object in a light, lean startup play is get these gears spinning as fast as you can, okay? And in this model, you don't have any chasms. It's tornado or bust, right? If you don't have 1 million users, you're probably not interesting. But it doesn't cost you that much to get to 1 million users, particularly now that you got AWS, cloud computing, and you can spin up all this open source stuff. It's amazing that you can do this stuff on the cheap. So, okay, so where does it actually apply? Well, in enterprise stuff, it does apply. And so what's happened in the first decade is we had all this consumer IT out there. This decade and the coming decade, we're taking all of those outer endpoints and try to bring them back into the enterprise as parts of our communities and as parts of our data stores. And this is where big data comes in, because all those endpoints in the Internet of People and then the Internet of Things is coming to rest inside. That is a big, big problem. There's no minimum viable product there. You have to have a whole product. This is where the bowling alley strategy matters. And what you care about here is, I want to, before the chasm in the early market, do really cool flagship projects with big companies who have big market recognition. And then when I cross the chasm, I'm going to find that first really compelling use case. We're going to pull together the consortium of whole product partners to nail that use case. We're going to build on it, and then we'll go forward from there. And the heavier and more intractable the mass of things you're trying to move, the more important it is to be more tightly focused. And I think in the world of big data, there's a fair amount of mass, and it's both a technical challenge and a social challenge, because you also have to re-engineer business processes and people's jobs and people's livelihoods, and that's very threatening. So there's a bunch of social work to do independent of all the technical work to get done, and they both have to be coordinated. Doesn't do any good to do one without the other. Okay, so just to kind of calibrate with big data, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amr from Cloudera. This is still, I think, the era of cool tools. I mean, look at those cool words, right? I'm going to take a python, with a shark and a giraffe, and I'm going to go after a pig, right? I mean, if you can't have fun with these words, you're not a data enthusiast. I mean, you're just not one of these folks, right? This is really cool. So cool tools, and you guys are going to talk a bunch about it in the next couple of days, and you're going to have a lot of fun. And your spouses don't know what any of these things are, but you do. It's really fun, okay? The other thing that happens in the early market, and I think this is why we're still in the early market, is the topics that you're going to talk about at this conference. These are big ideas, right? This is not for the small of skull, right? Scale invariant intelligence. Do you have that? Do I? I'm not quite sure. What does that mean? Real-time interactive big data visualization. Okay, that was a buzzword compliant phrase. I mean, basically, we packed as much as we could into that one. But the graph of all things. Don't you think Plato would have liked to have seen the graph of all? I mean, this is really, really fascinating stuff. It's still pretty abstract, just in case you didn't notice. But you know what? That's what the early market's about. The early market, the visionary market, is about, look, I know how to process abstractions. Thank you very much. I went to school. But my job is to try to figure out what would large-scale machine learning cookbooks mean in the context of, say, crime prevention in Oakland. Okay? And a visionary goes, huh, I got some ideas about that. And a pragmatist goes, I'm sorry, I'm a cop, I'm not a cook. You know? So this is what separates the people on the other side of the chasm. Okay, so that said, I think 2014 is another year of big projects. But I got to tell you, I think the clock is ticking because of the pressure of the visionaries on the landscape. I forgot I had one more slide here. This is the sort of stuff that the business visionaries are thinking about. These are still one-off big ideas. The ocean is a big data platform. It's a pretty cool idea, right? But it's like, I'm not quite sure how you monetize that. But I'm sure there's a gazillion ways to do it, right? You know, and so as you look at these things, this is still project sponsorship from visionary leadership. Now, to close this thing, 2015. And I'm not, it may be this year. I don't think it's going to get to 2016 without crossing the chasm. And this is pragmatists in pain. And you say, well, who's really in pain? I mean, who really has to act now as opposed to, could I put this off for another year? And the answer is, I think, places where the big data visionaries over the last 10 years, really, have gotten so much success, they're posing existential threats to the existence of the traditional players in their category. So if you think about it, if you look at, for example, Amazon. So Amazon poses an existential threat to Walmart, or to Target, or to Kmart, or to JCPenney, or to really almost any brick-and-mortar retailer. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not just a better operating model, this is a different business model. I could just be in the wrong place. I could be a dinosaur in the age of the mammals, okay? If you look at Google and what it's done to advertising, the whole advertising industry is absolutely back on its heels. It does not know how to proceed in a digital world. And as more and more ad dollars go onto the digital world, the issue is, you remember when Carol Bartz was running Yahoo and we kept on saying, is it a media company or a technology company? And the answer was it was a technology company, and that's kind of why Marissa's there right now. It turns out with every one of these, the answer is it's a technology company. Is Walmart a retail company or a technology company? It's a technology company. Should the New York Times be a media property or a technology property? It should be a technology property. You know, if you look at cybercriminal, everything has to be a technology property. If you're not a technology property, you can't play in a digital world. But most people weren't born into a digital world, and they don't have the infrastructure to play. So there's about $1 trillion or so worth of work to get done soon, which is why I think we're going to cross the chasm. And so the key idea here, I think, with the pragmatists is they're having this experience, the penny drops. And the penny drops, and this is a quote that I gave at a talk last year, but it was on the thing for today's conference. Without big data analytics, you know, companies are blind and deaf, wandering out onto the web like deer onto a freeway. That really is the situation in these existentially threatened industries. That cannot last, and they need your help. And I hope that a bunch of you will focus on these use cases and give them that help, because that will get big data across the chasm, and we'll be on to the next show. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I enjoyed having a chance to talk to you. I'm going to turn it back over to Amr. Thanks.